this is really the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to talk about. Besides the Bitcoin thing, of course, the Bitcoin things are important. But here in Canada, let's share the biggest, kind of economic or political thing that's happened in Canada for a long time. That's not an election. The Trudeau government has announced what's being called a tax holiday, and this tax holiday will span from December 14th to February 15th of 2025. So it's about 2 months. And it's being called a GST/HST holiday. So HST, if you guys don't know, stands for Harmonized Sales Tax, and GST. I don't even know what the acronym stands for, like government sales tax. But it's like a sales tax that's attached to certain items, right? And the GST is gonna disappear for 2 months for certain items all across the country. And we'll go through the list in more detail a little bit later. But essentially, that's the first part of what the Trudeau government is doing to address the cost of living crisis that we're seeing here in Canada. Now, the second part, which has unfortunately been delayed, or maybe it's fortunately, depending on how you view it, but the $250 stimulus checks, it's been delayed in Parliament because at first Trudeau, what he wanted to do, and the Liberal Party, it's not just Trudeau, but the entire Liberal Party that's in charge of the Canadian government right now, what they wanted to do was give everybody who contributed to EI and to, I think, like CPP, and basically if you had a job and you made money and you contributed to the social security system, then you also made less than $150,000 last year in 2023, then you will get a $250 one-time check sometime in the spring of 2025. However, the NDP has vowed to not support this, not because they're afraid of stimmy checks being inflationary or all that stuff. No, they're actually approaching it from the other side. They're saying that it doesn't go far enough because it's excluding seniors, right? So if you're retired, then you're drawing from, like, maybe you're drawing from CPP, but you're drawing from the system. You're not contributing to EI and stuff like that anymore. So yeah, like if you're a senior, then you're excluded under the current plan. And the NDP was the left-wing socialist parties for people who are not into Canadian politics, but the NDP was basically like, if you don't expand this to people with disabilities and seniors, then we're not going to go for this at all. So they're debating it, and the Liberals are trying to negotiate, but it doesn't look like they're incredibly willing to expand eligibility of this check. So that's the first piece of news. And then we'll have to see what happens with the checks. But back to the tax holiday, I mentioned earlier that there was a list of items that are exempt from the GST and HST come December 14th for 2 months. And here's the list. So as you can see, the list includes things like, children's clothing, footwear, car seats. If you don't have kids, then maybe this stuff is not that interesting to you. But what is interesting is that video games and video game consoles will now be tax-free for 2 months. But funnily enough, it only includes physical video games, so you have to go out and buy the disc. If you buy it on Steam, it doesn't count. If it's digital, it doesn't count. Physical books, printed newspapers are exempt, as well as the biggest one for me is food and beverage. I.e. restaurants. So in other words, all restaurants will be tax-free for 2 months. So that's the biggest one for me. I don't know about for you guys, but yeah, that's kind of the first part of the story. And I have some thoughts on what I think about both the GST holiday and the $250 checks. But I'll save those thoughts for a little bit later. Now, I just wanted to get what you guys' initial reaction is to these programs. Do you think that you'll be able to take advantage of these programs? You think that we should do these programs? Are you excited for the GST holiday, or just what are your thoughts on it in general?
To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of it at all. Like, that's not to say that not gonna take full advantage of it, because I definitely will. If you give me $250, I'll definitely take it for sure. And if you give no tax on like specific items, I'm definitely gonna buy things that I otherwise wouldn't because of the taxes. But I think in a state of an economy where we're trying to cut interest rates and we're trying to combat with like inflationary times, I don't think any kind of money printing whatsoever is the smartest thing to do, because if we're trying to cut interest rates and then we're just printing more money and giving money to Canadians, then there's going to be like a certain part or portion of life down the road where we're going to have to re-hike the rates, and then that's just going to cause so much trouble for Canadians. So instead of teeter-tottering, why don't you just like keep everything as is? I guess it's a political act to get votes, but at the same time, like, are you looking out for Canadian people, or you're just like looking out for your own like job? And I don't think that's necessarily the right thing for like the overall Canadian population. I think it would have been better off if we just not have done this in the first place. And I think it's pretty interesting how the NDP doesn't want to do it just because it's not supported by seniors, and it seems like they're not getting the points, which is kind of ridiculous. Just because it's out of touch for them because they get a nice pension check and like a nice salary. They probably don't care as much as like the single mom raising a family of like three or something, where they have to struggle and stuff. But um, I don't even know what your other question. What was your other question? Like, what were the questions?
Yeah, my other question was, what? Well, first of all, are you excited for this GST holiday? And second of all, what did you like? What do you think about the categories of stuff that's included? I guess maybe I didn't ask that, but I was going to ask that, so maybe I'll just ask it now. Like, what do you think of the category of stuff that's included in this GST holiday? Are you like, do you think this list could be expanded, or is too long, or maybe it's like too broad, or is not broad enough, or what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, like I said, like I don't like the idea of money printing, but I mean, like anything that's advantageous to us is like quite nice, I guess. It's like it's human nature. Like if you get like a cheaper thing, of course you're gonna like it, but you gotta reap the after effects, which kind of suck. But overall, I think in terms of Christmas shopping, I am probably excited about it because from the little categories that are applicable to me, I'll probably try my best to find those presents within these guidelines, we'll call them. But I don't know what I'm gonna possibly do with children toys. I mean, parents of two, one, three plus children, whatever, probably gonna have more handle on that. In a perfect world, if like our economy was really good, I think having more categories would be really nice. But I think on an overall scale, wish none of it was really around. But I don't really game that much, but with the right price, maybe I would. I don't know if like a Switch would be on sale or something, and I think I'd probably take advantage of the food and beverage section just because it's flipping awesome. And I'm going back home to Toronto to see my family, and there's a lot of cool restaurants there. Like I'll try Shake Shack, and then that'd be nice to have tax free. So I don't mind that at all, and so on and so forth. So these are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, good points. And maybe I'll save my opinion for a little bit later. And I do have a lot to say on what I think of this list specifically, but I don't want to take up too much time because I've already spoken a lot. And I know Tristan is dying to speak. So I will pass the mic off to him first.
Oh, heck yeah. Let's turn on that money printer. Let's go. Yeah, I gotta say, I think this is very much a attempt to buy some votes because guess what? Inflation is a lagged effect, so we will not feel this for 8, 10 months, 12 months, a year and a half. But we will feel it at some point. And the simple fact of the matter is that by giving us a one-time $250 rebate plus all this tax break, Trudeau will go, "Oh, I gave Canadians a tax break at the holidays so that they could afford their Christmas and stuff." And I'm for the working people. He can say all that, and he can be like, oh, inflation is at 2%. It's all good. Everything's fine. But then when the inflation actually kicks in a few months after the upcoming 2025 election for in Canada, we will all be suffering because of the additional inflation that would have to that this will cause. Again, that's not me saying that we shouldn't make efforts to reduce the cost of stuff like this for people in general. It's just that the government handing out the money is not conducive to improving the economy. What we're really lacking in Canada is the ability and the drive for the people to get more money on their own 2 feet is really what it comes down to. Like we really handing out $250 at the end of the day is not going to save people. It might, be the difference between someone eating and not eating, but it's not going to be sufficient to replace a lost job or something to that effect. So it's also kind of like it's not really enough to really super benefit the people who are getting it, but it's also like still substantial enough that there will be a lot of inflation because of it. Again, is this going to are we actually going to see this in our grocery bills or something to that effect? Maybe not specifically, but we will see it at some point. That is just how you can't increase the money supply without also causing an increase in the level of inflation. It's just how economics works, unfortunately for the government. So at the end of the day, it's I just kind of I feel like it's not going to be super beneficial for most people. On that front, am I going to use it? Of course, because if you don't use it, you're going to have the inflation in the future, and you also aren't going to have the benefit of the not inflation but cheaper stuff now. So on that front, there is an incentive to utilize it as much as possible, because of the fact that if I don't, and say video games go up in price because of the additional inflation that has been a lagged effect, I will have lost out twice, because I will have lost out on saving the tax, and I will have lost out on the new inflated cost. So I will be taking advantage of it as much as I can. I realistically won't have a ton of opportunity to, but I think that there are some areas that look compelling. Interestingly enough, children's toys includes board games, and I am a big fan of board games. So there are definitely some board games that will be obtained on that front as a result of this, because of the cheaper prices, the lower tax on those. And, if you combine that with Boxing Day, for example, you can potentially see some really great deals. I kind of feel like it's not really. I feel like it's very much just an attempt to buy votes from Liberals. I don't think it's actually going to really save that many people, and I don't think it's either going to save or help the Liberals that much, because it's just the dollar amount is, as I said, not enough that it can really, really help someone, but it's still enough that there is a lot of cost in inflation that's there. So it's not really I think that most people, a $250 influx of cash will be beneficial for a bit, but you will eventually spend that relatively quickly, especially when we compare to COVID times, for example, where the government was giving you like $2,000 for the if you lost your job because of COVID. See that, like 2,000 versus 250, you know, this is a much bigger difference. So I don't find it to be a particularly compelling offer. It just seems like we're just going to get a bunch more inflation and basically a slightly better Christmas. But I don't know. Maybe $250 goes really far for a lot of people. So maybe I am wrong on that front. I'm just especially if they take off the GST taxes on stuff that you already need to buy. It's just that the areas that they picked, a lot of them are not really like going to be that helpful, I don't think, for a lot of people. I think that's kind of another big factor. It's just kind of, they seem very, very strange areas. It's not so much stuff that is going to improve your life. It's much more stuff that is like kind of things to do. And I just don't think that that is really going to result in people really able to benefit from the GST HST holiday tax break in a degree that actually improves their lifestyle or their standard of living. They're just going to be capable of, enjoying some additional pieces that maybe they were missing in the past, which I guess you could argue that is improving their standard of living. But it's like, maybe you can, I don't think that there's that many people who were, on the fence about buying a PS5, for example. And they were like, that GST is too much money for me, man. Like that's the reason I can't afford to buy this PS5. I feel like it's very much something where people are not really either buy the PS4 or the PS5, or they're not going to buy the PS5.
To be fair, in Ontario, the HST is 13%, and you live in Alberta where it is 5%. So I feel like it makes a lot bigger of a difference in Ontario than it does in Alberta.
It takes off the provincial amount? I thought it just took off the federal amount.
Well, I'm not sure how it works in Alberta, but I know for Ontario, because it's HST, it'll be the whole amount because it's all like integrated together. But if it's split between provincial and federal, then I think there was some discussions on whether the like provincial governments are going to follow the federal feds lead into like doing it. I'm not sure how it works in Alberta, but I know like for all the provinces that have HST, basically like that's going to be all gone. So literally like Ontario will go from 13 to 0 for 2 months. So that's going to be really nice. I'm like personally pretty excited for this. And to be fair to Trudeau, I think that if he's going to spend, because this program is going to cost $1.6 billion, like the GST holiday, not including the checks, but just the GST holiday alone, it's going to cost $1.6 billion, which, it's not like a terribly large amount of money. And if you're going to spend $1.6 billion, I think that this is actually the best $1.6 billion that Trudeau has ever spent for us on behalf of, because if you look at all the other stuff that he spent on, it's like the GST holiday is probably one of the most beneficial ways to spend $1.6 billion that Trudeau has ever come up with. Now, with this being said, I'm not a big fan of the list of stuff. Obviously, I'm going to take advantage of it, and I like the restaurant part of it and stuff like that. But if you look at the list, it's all like stuff that to placate you, right? Like, you ever read the novel Brave New World, where everyone's addicted to this drug called Soma, and it's like it just makes you happy and it just makes you tuned out, and like once you're on it, you just feel euphoric all the time, and you don't like think about all the how like sucky your life is, and you actually live in like a dystopia and stuff like that. But you think you live in a utopia, but you actually live in a dystopia, but you don't realize that because like you're on this drug, right? So if you look at all this stuff that is on the list, it's all like junk food, video games, fast food will be included. I mean, even board games to an extent. I know like people say it's educational, it's like whatever, right? But also for food and beverage, it actually includes beer and wine and cider. So like put alcohol in it too, right? So if you look at the list, it's all kind of stuff to like placate you, to like distract you from how sucky your life is, right? And when Canadians, like people are like, hey Andy, I thought you were all for tax breaks. I thought you liked tax breaks. It's like, yes, I like tax breaks, but what I asked for and what a lot of Canadians are asking for is a tax break on stuff like the carbon tax, right? Because that affects your heating bill. The carbon tax, it affects your kind of your bills, right? Like the actual stuff that you need to pay on like a weekly and monthly basis. That's like bigger ticket items. For like the GST holiday, what we ended up getting was a tax break on just like consumption related stuff, right? And small stuff. It's like if you buy a bag of chips, I think in Ontario, you were already paying only 5% for a lot of these like snack foods and stuff. So it's not even a 13% drop for those snack foods because you were not paying 13% before to begin with. You're only paying 5%, and now like sure they can drop the 5%, but how expensive is a bag of chips, right? Even with inflated prices, it can't be more than $5 for a bag of chips. So you're not saving that much. You're saving like cents. Basically, if you look at this list, it's not going to make that much of a difference in your life, and I just think that the tone is not good, right? Because I'm not sure if you would agree with me on this, but it just seems like Trudeau just wants us to like eat some junk food and play some video games and forget about how like how the economic situation or social situation in Canada has degraded under his watch. Maybe I'm just super biased, but I'd love to hear what you guys think about that comment.
It does kind of seem like play your video games and don't think about the fact that you can't afford a house and that you'll never be able to afford a house kind of vibe. I feel like that's really the big issue that I feel like we've got over here is like we've got all of these items here that are very much like all of these are basically everything in this list is not a necessity. It's a nice to have. So it's very much like benefiting things that people may already be avoiding purchasing because of their terrible life scenario, because of the increasing cost of living and Trudeau's with our buddy Trudeau. And sorry, just to clarify earlier, I was under the impression that this was just removing the 5% federal, not the whole 13%. If it is the whole, since it's from the sound of things, it's the whole 13%, that is a very big difference. So that definitely would be enough to sway someone from buying a console, for example, where 13% is on a $500 PS5, for example, is humongous. It's like $100 at that point, basically. So I stand corrected on that one, but I think that it doesn't really. Yeah, I think I do kind of see the point that this is all just stuff to distract you from how terrible it is, everything is, rather than really help anyone in any meaningful way, right?
And don't you think it kind of benefits the rich a little when they include like video game consoles? Because like PS5s are like what, $500, $600. So if you're buying a PS5, you're probably well off enough to not be like starving on the streets, and or maybe you're just incredibly financially irresponsible. But I think like the vast majority of people who can afford a PS5, they're probably not the type of people that are absolutely struggling. Maybe they're not, they're middle class, they can't buy a house, but they're not like, having to turn the heat off because they can't afford to pay the heating bill, right? So yeah, I just think that it's a lot of this, like, even like restaurant, like I'm gonna take advantage of this, but like I don't want to call myself rich because I'm not there yet. Maybe by this time next year, if Bitcoin really runs, but like I'm like well off enough such I don't have to like really worry about like bills and stuff. Like I can comfortably be able to afford those, and at the same time, if I were to get a tax break on these like food and beverages, I feel like it kind of like disproportionately benefits me because I like would actually take advantage of this a lot and go out to restaurants and stuff like that. And I just feel like this GST holiday, it doesn't really filter in to like the poor as well as the liberals think it does. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's just my opinion.